August 19, 1944. Wehrmacht Headquarters, East Prussia. General Oberst Alfred Jodl studied the latest intelligence from the disintegrating Western Front. His staff had calculated the scale of Allied supply lines, stretching 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to Patton's spearheading Third Army. The Americans had outrun their logistics. Patton's advance would stall within days, perhaps hours. No army could maintain such rapid movement without fuel. From his position at Hitler's Wolfschanz headquarters, Jodl considered what every German commander knew from experience. An armored division consumed 150,000 gallons of fuel each day on the move. With the Americans now 400 miles from their depots, the conclusion was unavoidable. Patton's Third Army would grind to a halt, giving the Wehrmacht time to regroup along the Seine, perhaps hold until winter. What Jodl could not foresee was that, 125 miles away, 5,958 trucks were already moving east in a continuous convoy, headlights cutting through the night. They carried 12,500 tons of supplies every 24 hours. The Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so daring that German military science had never imagined it possible, was about to overturn every assumption about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly stalled tanks would smash through German positions along the Seine. Within a week, Paris would be liberated. Within a month, the German border would be within reach. The Wehrmacht's most brilliant strategists were about to witness a lesson in American logistics, executed by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% African American, who turned a one-way highway system into the most efficient military supply line in history. German confidence in the failure of American logistics came from decades of military experience. The Wehrmacht had pioneered blitzkrieg, mastered combined arms warfare, and understood the constraints of extended supply lines. Their campaigns had often stalled not because of enemy resistance but due to simple shortages. In Russia, German advances faltered not from Soviet strength initially, but because supplies could not reach the front. Trucks broke down on Russian roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of German transport, could not match the speed of panzer spearheads. Differences in railway gauge left supplies stranded hundreds of miles from the front. General de Panzer's officer, Heinrich von Lewitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps from September 1944, had written in July, "The Americans faced the same logistical impossibility we encountered in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a weakness. Machines require fuel, ammunition, spare parts. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History shows what comes next: paralysis." German intelligence had carefully monitored American consumption rates. A Sherman tank burned half a gallon per mile on roads, much more cross-country. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies per day. An armored division needed 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing along a 60-mile front. The numbers seemed irrefutable: 12,000 tons daily, transported 400 miles from beaches over damaged roads through a transportation network the Germans had destroyed during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, future Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, calculated on August 20th, even if the Americans had unlimited trucks, they did not, perfect roads, they did not exist, and no mechanical failures, impossible, they could not sustain Patton's advance for more than 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be broken, not even by American industry. At 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau near Le Havre, Lieutenant Colonel Lourenayers of the Motor Transport Service addressed a room of skeptical officers. The calculations were clear: Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies faster than any army in history, advancing at a pace beyond traditional logistics. Railways, scheduled convoys, depot distribution, all had failed under the strain. "We are going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front," Ayers announced. "Every vehicle will run 20 hours out of 24. Stops only for fuel or emergencies. We will move at least 12,500 tons daily." The name came from railway terminology: a red ball shipment received absolute priority. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle. Absolute priority. No delays. No exceptions. The plan defied German military doctrine: 2 parallel one-way highways, loaded trucks moving forward, empties returning, 24-hour operations with headlights on, abandoning blackout rules, 5-minute convoy intervals, maintaining 35 miles per hour average, mobile maintenance every 50 miles, MP checkpoints for moving trucks slower than 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the advanced section of ADSE, reviewed the projected figures. To supply Patton's advancing army, 140 truck companies were required, at least 5,958 vehicles operating at 90% availability. According to every logistics textbook, it was impossible. Yet, within 36 hours, the impossible became reality. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3,916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, the Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105 mm artillery shells destined for Patton's guns at Melun, 300 miles to the east. The composition of the Red Ball Express would have confounded German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who would eventually operate the route, roughly 75% were African American soldiers serving in a segregated army. Men denied entry to white restaurants and facilities across much of the United States were now keeping the most celebrated white general's army in motion. Within hours, these drivers had created their own culture. Slogans appeared on trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. Traffic rules emerged spontaneously. Slow vehicles pulled aside immediately, mechanical failures were shoved into ditches, and any truck moving under 20 miles per hour was treated as a roadblock. By August 28, German reconnaissance units reported something unprecedented. Soldiers from Aufklärung 116 observed from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route an unbroken column of vehicles, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No spacing. No blackout discipline. Estimates: 1,000 vehicles per hour. The Americans had abandoned conventional military precautions. To the Germans, it was madness. Headlights at night invited air attack. Continuous columns were perfect artillery targets. No spacing meant a single disabled truck could halt the convoy. Yet the Americans pressed on, unconcerned. On August 30th, General Lieutenant Edgar Feuinger of the 21st Panzer Division observed the Red Ball Express from concealed positions. His report to Army Group B reflected alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They do not hide, they do not disperse, they do not follow any rules we know. It is not military science, it is mass production applied to warfare. What the Germans could not grasp was that American logistics followed entirely different principles. Where German doctrine stressed concealment, Americans relied on sheer volume. Where Germans preserved vehicles, Americans expected 20% mechanical failure and planned accordingly. Where Germans followed rigid procedures, Americans improvised constantly. The Red Ball Express delivered numbers that German calculations had deemed impossible. From August 25 to 31, 1944, the first week of operations, 89,939 tons of supplies were delivered, an average of 12,848 tons daily. Round-trip distance, 686 miles. Vehicle rotations, 5,958 trucks making 1.5 trips per day. Fuel consumed by the operation itself, 300,000 gallons. German logistics specialists, capturing these figures from American documents, dismissed them as propaganda. Yet the numbers were real, and accelerating. By September 5, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that confounded German officers still relying on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus. Average convoy size, 67 vehicles. Standard load, 5 tons, frequently 7. Time to cover 350 miles one way, 14 hours. Turnaround at each end, 2 hours. Vehicles in constant motion, 5,000 at any given moment. Innovations emerged daily as drivers and mechanics solved problems German doctrine considered insurmountable. Broken trucks, about 1,800 per day, were repaired roadside by mobile maintenance units. Mechanics triaged, 15 minutes to repair or push off-road. Parts were cannibalized from vehicles beyond repair. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes with mobile cranes. Congested routes inspired alternate paths. French buses were commandeered to move personnel and free trucks. Captured German vehicles, painted olive drab, were pressed into service. Bypasses were built around destroyed bridges, using rubble as roadbed. The Germans, watching chaos turn into order, could not comprehend it. Even American fuel management stunned them. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily, more than many German armies received in total, but fuel never ran out. Parallel innovations, like Operation Pluto pipelines under the English Channel, supplied forward dumps every 25 miles. Tanker trucks operated their own convoys, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Lement observed from aerial reconnaissance, "The Americans maintain fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to whole panzer divisions." This was not war as the Germans understood it, it was industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express did more than supply Patton's advance, it multiplied its speed in ways that defied conventional calculations. German doctrine held that an armored division could advance 20 to 30 miles per day under optimal conditions. Patton's divisions, fueled by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, halted at noon for resupply, and found Red Ball trucks waiting with fuel and ammunition. By afternoon, they advanced another 32 miles, a single-day total of 67 miles. German planners, who assumed a maximum of 30 miles per day, were stunned. General Oberst Heinz Guderian in East Prussia initially refused to believe the reports. No armored force could maintain 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone made it impossible. Surely this was propaganda, or misidentification. Intercepted American radio traffic confirmed otherwise. Even more unsettling for the Germans, the Americans broadcast their positions openly, without codes, supremely confident that they could move faster than any German response. By September 5, German intelligence had compiled detailed reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic. Every assumption about American military capability had to be revised. The reports contained observations that defied German military science. Americans abandoned vehicles rather than repair them, pushed drivers for days on stimulants, ignored camouflage rules, yet suffered no effective attacks. Daily mechanical failure rates of 30% were rendered irrelevant by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European army was no obstacle. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction revealed growing desperation. If these reports were accurate, the Germans were facing not merely an enemy army, but a superior civilization. The Americans did not hide because they did not fear. They wasted resources because they had inexhaustible reserves. Military tactics alone could not defeat them. The human cost was enormous. Red Ball drivers endured 72-hour shifts, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents claimed 300 lives during the operation. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, or ignited when engines overheated. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, mostly African American, denied equal rights at home, knew they were making history. Every mile and every ton delivered disproved Hitler's racial theories. Captured German officers gave striking testimony. Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, told interrogators, "We realized we had lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust your drivers, and yet you succeed through sheer volume. You have industrialized warfare beyond comprehension." The psychological impact on German forces was profound. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks every night, an unending sound of motors and supplies. Riflemen had 3 rounds each while the Americans delivered millions. The noise alone became a weapon. The vehicles themselves amazed German engineers. The GMC's CCKW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, embodied mass production perfection. By war's end, General Motors had built over 500,000 of them, more than the entire German military possessed in all categories. The trucks included innovations Germans had not implemented: all-wheel drive as standard, automatic tire inflation, waterproofing for 30-inch fording, engines tolerant of low-quality fuel, functional winter heaters. American maintenance philosophy was equally revolutionary. Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded entire vehicles for minor faults. Germans relied on master mechanics, Americans deployed thousands of competent mechanics performing 80% of all repairs. As the front moved east, the Red Ball Express adapted with astonishing speed. When the original route to Chartres became insufficient, Americans extended operations overnight: White Ball Express from Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond from Cherbourg to railroad transfer points, Red Lion from Bayeux to Brussels, ABC from Antwerp through Brussels to Charleroi. Each new route became operational within 48 hours. German officers required weeks for similar planning. Americans simply painted new markers, assigned trucks, and resumed movement. The predominance of African American drivers created cognitive dissonance for Nazi theorists. Ideology declared blacks inferior, incapable of technical skill or initiative. Yet these drivers performed logistics miracles the Germans could not match. The irony was clear to the soldiers themselves: every mile driven, every load delivered, proved Hitler wrong. They were defeating racism with truck keys, disproving Nazi ideology through sheer performance. Some German prisoners, forced to labor loading Red Ball trucks, found their worldview shattered. African American sergeants calculated weight distributions faster than German engineers, spoke English better than their instructors, and treated prisoners fairly, defying every racial stereotype Nazi propaganda had drilled into the Wehrmacht. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure the Germans believed impossible to create under combat conditions. American engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges, established 15 major fuel depots, 26 maintenance stations, and 8 temporary cities for drivers, all while the operation remained active. The bridge at Monty, destroyed by German engineers specifically to halt American logistics, was rebuilt in 14 hours. Red Ball convoys deterred only 8 miles over hastily bulldozed bypasses. German engineers watched in disbelief. No planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, just immediate action. The Americans built faster than the Germans could destroy, creating vital infrastructure seemingly overnight in French fields. One achievement particularly stunned German artillery officers: ammunition supply rates exceeding their highest theoretical calculations. American artillery fired without restriction, a luxury no German unit had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of Metz's fortifications in September 1944, the XDX Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round, plus 20% surplus. German defenders, rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day, were overwhelmed. American guns fired continuously while German officers calculated that supplying such fire required 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour. The Red Ball Express supplied it without pause. Vehicle attrition was staggering. By late September, the average truck life had fallen to 10,000 miles. Normal was 30,000. Daily breakdown rates reached 30%. Engines were replaced at 500 per week. 10,000 tires consumed weekly. More than 5,000 vehicles were destroyed or abandoned. Yet the operation never slowed. American production anticipated the losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers trained in 2 days were immediately deployed. Germans noted that the Americans were destroying more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. But capacity increased, not decreased. Logistics outran consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed abundance that contradicted years of occupation scarcity. The psychological impact was profound. Drivers, especially African American, often shared rations with civilians despite regulations: chocolate, cigarettes, soap. Children gathered at every stop. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Intelligence noted the propaganda effect. Civilians increasingly believed American victory inevitable, citing the convoys as proof. Resistance activity along Red Ball routes surged by 400%. Populations that once accepted occupation now opposed it actively. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest test. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to maintain supply. Round trips exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing, vehicles breaking down. German intelligence detected the strain. General de Panzertrooper Hasse von Mantua reported on September 8. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have widened from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. But American adaptability again confounded the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball reorganized. Intermediate transfer points cut runs to 350 miles. Driver rotation systems were implemented. Forward maintenance bases established, and the number of assigned vehicles doubled. By September 12, tonnage delivered had actually increased. What should have been a crisis only strengthened the system. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans launched another solution deemed impossible: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport aircraft delivered critical supplies directly to forward units, each carrying 3 tons. On September 16, German observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, 2,700 tons delivered by air. For comparison, the Luftwaffe at Stalingrad had managed 300 tons daily at maximum effort. The Americans treated aircraft like trucks, disregarding fighter escort needs or fuel limitations, assuming losses and overwhelming them with sheer numbers. German planners could not match this industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express operated under principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions that in the Wehrmacht would have been reserved for generals. Sergeants commanded operations larger than German colonels could manage. This decentralization bewildered German observers. American logistics functioned without apparent central control, yet achieved unprecedented efficiency. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should have ensued. Instead, the Red Ball Express achieved remarkable efficiency, something the Wehrmacht could not replicate with its rigid hierarchy. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to reduce Red Ball requirements. What had been planned as a 10-day operation had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own borders, reflected on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated primarily by American tanks or aircraft. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is strategy. The transition to rail transport was itself extraordinary. American railroad engineers reconstructed 1,000 miles of destroyed French rail lines while the Red Ball continued to operate, laying new track faster than Germans could destroy it, often using captured German equipment. Final statistics of the Red Ball Express defied all German calculations. 82 days of operation, 412,193 tons of supplies delivered, 222 million ton-miles, an average of 5,958 vehicles, peaking at 7,000, 23,000 drivers employed, 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily, 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton alone, 15 million rations, 135,000 tons of medical supplies. German officers, reviewing these figures in captivity, admitted they had based their calculations on European precedents, multiplying their best performance by 3 and assuming that represented the American maximum. They had underestimated by a factor of 10. Beyond tonnage and distance, The Red Ball Express struck a deeper blow. It shattered German confidence in their own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched the same Americans achieve logistics miracles through determination and industrial power. German prisoners would stand silently at camp fences, counting passing Red Ball trucks. Some wept. They understood the implications, not merely that Americans could supply their armies, but that they could expend more than the Germans could produce. Worldviews collapsed one truck at a time. The operation forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the American military. Its success relied overwhelmingly on African American soldiers, still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. In September 1944, General Eisenhower visited Red Ball operations firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood watching colored drivers who'd been working 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things.'" The operation accelerated pressures toward military desegregation. 3 years later, African American soldiers in France had proven what they had always known: given the tools and opportunity, they could match anyone. The Red Ball Express was their battlefield, and they had won decisively. German racial theorists struggled to reconcile this. SS publications ceased referencing American logistics, unable to deny the evidence. Post-war, German military engineers studied the Red Ball Express intensively. Lessons revolutionized logistics thinking worldwide: volume overcomes inefficiency, mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability, decentralized execution enables speed, standardization multiplies capability, human endurance exceeds prior assumptions. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved logistics determines strategy, not the reverse. Americans understood this. We learned it too late." Among the 23,000 drivers, individual acts of heroism were verified in military records, incomprehensible to German observers. Corporal John L. Houston drove continuously for 48 hours delivering ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division at Camera, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times yet continuing after being revived by fellow drivers. Private Booker T. Washington's truck carrying medical supplies caught fire from overheated brakes. Instead of abandoning it, he drove 2 miles to a field hospital before leaping out as flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers from both armies. These stories multiplied thousands of times, revealing American military culture, initiative, calculated risk, and mission accomplishment over regulatory compliance. Desperately, German forces attempted to replicate the Red Ball Express in late 1944. Operation Greif, during the Battle of the Bulge, planned to use captured American trucks to create supply lines. The effort failed immediately. German drivers could not maintain American speeds, mechanics could not repair vehicles fast enough, fuel supplies were insufficient, and most fundamentally, the Germans could not replicate the American mindset of unlimited resources. Obstany, commanding the operation, reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat." The winter of 1944-45 tested the Red Ball Express like nothing before. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have halted wheeled transport. German doctrine held that logistics using trucks became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball continued. Drivers changed tires, poured alcohol into radiators, and pressed on. Speeds fell from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but tonnage delivery persisted. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped entire panzer divisions. The Americans had created a system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It was neither elegant nor efficient by German standards, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were required to study Red Ball operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. General d'Infanterie Friedrich Schultz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. Americans created a temporary civilization, thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days. The most insightful analysis came from General R. Hegderian, father of German armored warfare. We invented blitzkrieg, he wrote, but never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible. The Red Ball Express was not a supply line, but a flowing river of material that drowned our forces. The operation cost the United States roughly $100 million in 1944, vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads damaged, claims from the French. German officers, accustomed to managing scarcity, found the figure incomprehensible. Yet Americans considered it cheap. The Red Ball enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by an estimated 6 months. At $250 million per day of war, the Express paid for itself in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, commanding logistics for the European theater, stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it's acceptable overhead." An unexpected consequence of the Red Ball Express was its impact on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of drivers returned home with experience running the world's largest transportation network. Veterans founded trucking companies, designed interstate highways, and created modern American logistics. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were started by Red Ball veterans, applying lessons of military logistics to commerce. They had learned that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and if you can keep trucks rolling 24 hours a day, you can move the world. Military historians recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance would have halted, Paris would have fallen weeks later, and German forces might have established winter defensive lines. The operation validated American doctrine emphasizing logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in modern war, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundert, Supreme German Commander in the West, received detailed intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After hours of study, he summoned his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed a culminating point where advancing forces outrun supplies. That point does not exist. They have revolutionized warfare while we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Oberst Hanspadel, suggested attacking the Red Ball routes with the Luftwaffe. Von Rundert's response revealed full comprehension. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. Destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them in a week. We would need to destroy 200 trucks daily just to match their production. We do not have 200 aircraft total." Behind the statistics were human stories that revealed American character to German observers. Drivers went 3 days without sleep, refusing relief because their trucks might not make it through. Mechanics worked in freezing rain to keep convoys moving. Teenagers lied about their age to drive trucks. Such stories, repeated throughout the operation, created a mythology that demoralized German forces. Americans were not soft as propaganda claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but voluntarily, not out of fear, making them far more dangerous than German doctrine anticipated. The Red Ball Express became unintentional propaganda, more powerful than any planned operation. German soldiers could hear the convoys at night, endless streams of engines that never stopped. The sound itself became psychological warfare. Units reported hearing ghost convoys that demoralized troops as effectively as actual logistics. The knowledge that Americans had effectively unlimited supplies while German forces rationed their last ammunition created a despair that eroded combat effectiveness. American psychological warfare units recognized this impact and began broadcasting truck engine sounds toward German lines even when no convoys were present. German units reported these phantom convoys as real, a testament to the psychological effect the Red Ball Express had inflicted. By November 1944, as rail lines were partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. Yet its methods had permanently transformed military logistics. Continuous, high-volume, wasteful but effective supply became a cornerstone of American military doctrine. Its final innovation was the speed of dissolution. Within 72 hours, 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, and hundreds of installations disappeared. Troops were reassigned, vehicles redistributed, and routes returned to civilian use. Germans required months to create smaller operations and years to dismantle them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Ball Express as evidence of the hopelessness of further resistance. General der Panzertrooper Hasse von Manteuffel stated during interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Field Marshal Albert Kessler, one of Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what surprised him most about American forces. His answer: "Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us you had militarized your society's entire production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers." The final statistics of the Red Ball Express stand as a testament to American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered, 412,193 tons. Total distance covered, 122 million ton-miles. Trucks employed, 5,958 daily average, 7,000 peak. Drivers involved, 23,000 total. Operating days 82. Fuel consumed, 57 million gallons. Tires worn, 180,000. Vehicles destroyed, over 5,000. Cost, $100 million. German divisions defeated through supply advantage, 47. Estimated war days shortened, 180. These figures tell a story that transcended military operations. They mark the moment when warfare changed forever, when industrial capacity became more important than tactical brilliance, when logistics determined strategy rather than serving it. On the 50th anniversary of D-Day in 1994, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. Veterans spoke of their pride in an operation that demonstrated American industrial might and individual determination could overcome any obstacle. They had driven through exhaustion, mechanical failure, and weathered that halted armor. Most were black soldiers, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition, but they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is not support, it is the main effort. The operation showed that industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale totalitarian efficiency could not match. German generals who had mocked American logistics were silenced by 6,000 trucks delivering 12,500 tons daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They expected Americans to follow European precedent, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans created a logistics tsunami that overwhelmed German forces with Allied abundance. Success came not from military genius, but from American traits Germans never understood: industrial excess, mechanical aptitude, improvisational skill, and, most importantly, the initiative of individual soldiers, making independent decisions that in the Wehrmacht would require field marshal approval. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote in his memoirs, "The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserve as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, mechanical failure, and whether that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers, mostly segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the final testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly African American drivers operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory achieved what German military science declared impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics should allow, maintained tempo beyond human endurance, and proved that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. German generals, who had laughed at American logistics, surrendered 82 days later to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally understanding that American trucks had defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance had overwhelmed military excellence, and that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express officially ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact resonated throughout military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or the smartest generals, but to the nation capable of delivering the most supplies, the fastest, and the farthest. The German generals who had laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves a place among the great military operations of history, not because it was elegant or efficient, it was either, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton moving, kept the Germans retreating, and demonstrated that in modern war, a convoy of trucks matters more than a column of tanks. The highways of France still bear the scars of the operation, ruts carved by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war was shortened, saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who mocked American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America speaking very loudly, in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped, carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour along a one-way road to victory. The final word belongs to a German officer, his name lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy of American trucks, he told his captives in accented English, "We prepared for everything, your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer passed him every 5 minutes, driven by exhausted Americans rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had turned logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. German generals stopped laughing when they realized this truth, but by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history. If you like this story, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. See you in the next video.